episode 16. Man. So, with us today, we have a guest. We have Ricky Pope from Christian's Nerd Unite and other nerdy podcasts. Trying to have a little representation from a little everywhere from the Christian community, and he happened to be next on the list. So, Ricky, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Doing fantastic. Good to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me.
Glad to have you.
You're welcome. So, Ricky, we tend to have a guest question whenever we have guests come on, seeing how we are the Long Distance podcast. 1, what is your favorite pizza? 2, favorite pizza place?
So, favorite pizza. I really enjoy Canadian bacon and mushroom. And I prefer thin crust.
Yes.
And, as far as my favorite, like if you go with chains, I prefer Mazio's. But there are a couple of local joints that are pretty decent. But I rarely get to go there because, they don't deliver and you've got to set aside time to actually go there, and they're out of the way and they're a little too far away. So I end up not going there very often. But probably Mazio's as far as the chain places go. And I will say, I prefer thin crust over thick crust most of the time. And I worked at a Mazio's at one point in my life when I was in college. And I found out things about how you make thick crust pizza that made me not want to eat it.
All right.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems like pizza places are the one place that make it really hard for delivery or even going to pick it up. I have one pizza place here that refuses to do delivery. Like they really want to do the whole old Pizza Hut model of the sit down restaurant. So they're like, no delivery, period. And it's like, which works for me because whenever I do go there, I'm always on the side of town, so it works out. But if I want any other day, it's like, oh, I gotta flip and go on the opposite side of town to go grab it. Like it's a whole thing. It's one of those models I don't think works anymore, especially now with things like DoorDash and Uber Eats. But
yep,
that's the world we live in. So your tagline is now I'm forgetting what it is. Faith, like something about faith and fandom. I had
where faith and fandom meet.
Where faith and fandom meet. Yes. Thank you. So, as a Christian nerd, is it hard for you when it comes to wanting to enjoy things, especially when certain subjects get brought up and like nerdy stuff that you may or may not be interested or may be interested in?
Is it hard for me? I don't think it's hard for me. And the reason is I feel like I have spent enough time in the Word and I've spent enough time in culture to understand where some things meet well and where some things don't meet well. I have not personally felt like this has been a big struggle for me. I run into people all the time where it is a huge struggle for them. And, they're striving with, is this okay? Is that okay? Is this not okay? Is this not okay? Because I do what I do, hosting podcasts and, talking to guests about different nerdy things and running nerdy Facebook groups. If I'm not called a heretic on a weekly basis, I feel like I'm doing my job wrong. So that can be, and I get that from both sides. I'm either too conservative or I'm too liberal. I am, whatever the case is, I'm not their flavor of the right Christian nerd, and I think that's a big flaw. I think every nerdy Christian is going to have their own favorites, the things that they like. Um, do I think there are definitely some things that we probably should avoid? Yeah, I definitely think there are a few things we should avoid. Um, are there some things that are questionable? You could just make those decisions on your own. I think there's a big spot for you to decide what is right for you, um, to view or to read, or whatever the case may be. But a lot of that's going to depend on your maturity and your basis in your faith. Um, if you're a young believer, then I think you need to probably be more cautious, because
Hmm.
you may not be prepared to deal with some of the questions that arise. If you've been a believer for a long time and you have a strong faith, when things come up, you hopefully you have learned to gather the tools to be able to deal with those situations in an intelligent and a spiritual way. And that's part of my deal when I think about this whole subject is I want to be able to have those conversations. So one of the shows that I've done, I have kind of rehashed a couple of times. I call it the nerd table. I, as a believer, need to be at the nerd table. Why do I need to be at the nerd table? I need to be at the nerd table because there are nerds there that don't have any faith. They don't have a belief. They don't have this framework, and inevitably questions come up. Well, if there's nobody that's a believer at the nerd table, there's nobody to help them uh, see what the path to truth is. They're going to just figure out something or decide something rather than having an opportunity to hear what the Bible says, or to understand that there is something there that you need to consider. So that's part of my thing about we need to be at the nerd table because there are opportunities there to share the gospel with people that might not hear it otherwise. I don't know if that answered your question, but I just went off there for
It
a while.
does, yeah. It. Oh no, no, you're fine. It tends to happen here. Uh, yeah. It like you said, people should have discernment in certain things.
Mhm.
Like I use the analogy of if I show it to my mom and she says something about it, then maybe I should listen to that. Like if there's something like my mom would always like we'd be watching stuff. She's like, "Oh, I really like that." I'm like, "Well, why doesn't she like it?" Because she is the more seasoned Christian to me. So it's like there's certain things like if there's certain subject matters, maybe we as Christians shouldn't be surrounding ourselves with as much, or um, just certain attitudes that there is that like I are there arguments to both sides. Do some people go too much on that? Yes,
Mhm.
but also that there is that
Yeah.
healthy dose of skepticism with it. Ricky, you started podcasting when? I thought, was it 2017, 2018? Or were you doing it before? Looking at you like your
Oh,
social media.
the Christian Nerd Unite podcast, the actual podcast, started in 2019 officially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had been doing a podcast previous to that with a friend of mine that wasn't explicitly Christian. Both of us are believers, but we were just doing a generic nerdy podcast, and that probably started 2 years before. And it's gone through multiple iterations, and it went on hiatus for a year or two. But so I've been doing some podcasting off and on for probably since 2017, maybe 2016. But the Christian Nerd Unite podcast officially started in 2019. I started the Facebook group first, the Facebook page, the Facebook group, to make sure that I had an audience that was interested in the kind of things I wanted to talk about before I started the podcast. Because I run into a lot of people that's like, I'm going to do a podcast on this, and they don't have an audience. There was never an audience, and they get frustrated. You know, why is there no audience for this? Well, I don't know why there's no audience for that, but there's not. So I started the group before that, and the group I think did start in 2018, and I just kind of I was gonna just see what happens here. Is there an interest? Once I knew there was interest, then I started making plans to launch the podcast.
Nice. I had another question on that, but I couldn't think of what was off the top of my head. I had a list of questions and I'm losing it. But so with podcasting,
Right.
like you're saying, like having to stop and start. What was there things you learned early on podcasting that you'd like that stick with you now? Especially now, like there are so many podcasts now because like there's been like a big podcast boom.
Oh yeah. There are a few things that I think I've learned over time, and one of them is that, and this is there's one thing that I'm not quite sure that I've learned yet. And this is a question mark in my brain. I'll talk to podcasting gurus about podcasting, and I'll tell them here's what I do. This is what I kind of content I'm putting out. And a lot of times they'll say, well, you probably need to niche that down even further. And I just can't bring myself to do it. For good or for ill, I just can't. I can't. Christian nerd in general is about as niche as I can get. I have kind of flavored that, and I tend to lean more into entertainment field versus video games. And that's just kind of a preference I've come up with. Although the podcast doesn't necessarily say that explicitly, just, when I invite guests on, most of the time they're not video game guys. Although I do from time to time run into a pretty cool Christian video game that I'm like, yeah, I want you on the podcast to talk about your stuff. So niching down is something that I think is important. I think some people try to niche down to the point that, they are one of the only people that want to listen to their podcast. So I think there's some limit there. The other thing is, if people aren't listening, then, take a really close look at your content and say, why are people, if people aren't listening, why are they not listening? Is it the production, or is it that this content just isn't hitting its audience?
Right.
Have I not found my audience, or do I not have an audience? And I think that's a big part of podcasting. And I feel like I struggle with that a lot. I have an okay listenership. It's not where I would like it to be. It's not paying my bills, so it's more for fun right now. But that's okay. And that is kind of the last thing: is if it's fun, keep doing it. When it stops being fun, stop doing it.
Right.
Because if it's not fun for you as a podcaster, it's probably not fun for the listeners either.
Yeah, there are some podcasts I've listened to where it's very much like, oh yeah, they're having a lot of fun here. And then there's others like down the line in that same podcast, we're like, oh, here's where they're not having fun anymore. And there's one podcast, they had that, and they're like, well, we're going to stop it. But then some of the guys were like, well, the two of them were like, oh, we're still having fun, so we're going to keep doing it. And like it branched off into other opportunities, other things. So I think it's like one of those things where it's like a job. At one point, that's the good job for you. But at a certain point, you move on to something else. So it's
I will say, if you're going to start a podcast, I do say, commit to 6 months at least, because you're not going to be good at first. It's going to take you a few podcasts to get your feet under you anyway. But after 6 months, I think you'll have a good idea of whether this is for you or not.
You tend to post a lot of, I think because I first came across you on your social media, through Instagram.
Okay.
I think it was through a random meme. I was like, oh, this is funny. Like, what's this? Oh, he does a podcast. Oh, this is the interesting way to advertise. So, with your memes, are they just stuff that you come off top of your head, like mid conversation, like in your podcast, or is it just like, oh, this is kind of funny? I've seen this somewhere else.
It's a little of both. Sometimes it is something that just came to mind. Sometimes it is, oh, that's a funny meme. How can I use that and make some subtle change to it to make it a little more me and a little less them? So it's a little of both. I am trying to create more original stuff lately, because Facebook seems to be wanting more of that. And Facebook is kind of where I have my big following, because the Facebook page Christian Nerds Unite has about 18,000 likes, something like that. I got about 18,000 people in the Facebook group. The Instagram is much smaller, so if you saw it on Instagram, I'm happy to know people are still seeing my stuff on Instagram. But not many people see it on Instagram. But so I am trying to create more and more original stuff, but a lot of times it's stuff that either I saw something that was really close to what I actually posted, or similar, but I want to adjust it a little bit. And there are times where I see a meme that is more secular based that I want to how can I fit that into a Christian context? And sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. And memes are always a testing place. Now, recently I had one that was, I don't remember where I posted this, because I run a couple of different social media pages. I posted one recently that I was working on. You guys, were any of you caught up in the AT&T blackout, cell phone blackout recently?
Thankfully, that did not affect me.
No, I was not. No,
no, I'm not on AT&T anymore.
Okay, nope. So initially, there were some reports that were like, there was a big solar flare. Maybe that was it. So I'm an old school wrestling fan. I don't follow it anymore, but I used to be a wrestling fan. And the first thing that popped in my head was, oh, a flare might have caused it. So really quickly, I got it. I grabbed a meme of this guy that looked on CNN, and I put, flare may have caused AT&T outage, and then right below that I put a picture of Ric Flair. And I thought it was funny. I don't know if it is funny, but I thought it was funny. The guys who are really good at memes are really good at making memes quickly based on what's happening right now. Unfortunately, I'm not that guy most of the time.
Oh yeah, I think a good meme.
I wish I was.
A good meme, and we'll have to ask one of our other guys, Silly, because he likes making memes. You have to be able to. You just have to be like quick with it.
Yeah.
Because there's different like strata of memes where it's like some are very current, like let's satire current stuff, and the other one, and like there's like like how many genres are in like fandom. There are so many like genres of meme. like some like you're saying, like some people are very quick with it, and some people are just like, oh, like I gotta take a little bit. I gotta craft like the perfect meme. Like
Yeah.
like I can't get it in that moment. It's just one
Yeah,
of those
it's
things.
hit or miss for me. And I've had, because, for those who are steeped in in the meme world, there are certain formats for memes that get used over and over again with different texts. So for a while, and I don't know if this is still true, but I have avoided it because it was such an issue for me. What is his name? He's a political guy, Crowder. He
Steve Crowder or something like that.
maybe Steve Crowder. The one
Is
where
it Steve
it's
Crowder?
him with a coffee cup in the middle of a park, sitting behind a table, and the sign
Oh
says,
yeah. Prove me wrong, whatever. Change my mind.
Change my mind. Every time I used that format, my meme got taken down and I got dinged. And it didn't matter what the subject was. One time I wrote Aslan is Jesus. And so if you're familiar with the
From
C.S.
Narnia,
Lewis
yeah.
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I said Aslan is Jesus, change my mind. And I got dinged. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. What? All I did was use a standard format. And, there's like hundreds of other people that use that format on a daily basis and never have a problem. Well, at first I thought, well, that's odd. So then, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks later, I used the same exact format with something else just as innocuous, and I got dinged again. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I am just not going to use this meme format.
So they just saw
That's not cool,
Steven, because I've always seen that meme. I never noticed who it was. So they're just dinging because it's Steven Crowder or something.
I don't know, but as far as I know, I'm the only one that was getting tagged for using it. And one time I was able to convince them that no, you're wrong. There's nothing offensive here. But just to make my life easier, I just stopped using it. But tons and tons of people every day use that one with no problems at all. So it is one of those things where Facebook has some weird back end stuff going on, and once it gets on a little tangent, then it will be annoying for people. But there was one for a while. This meme was going around, and everybody was like, "Oh, Facebook is censoring this, scripture." It was a scripture on a picture. I don't even remember what it was. But every time somebody posted that, it got taken down, and they were right. It was happening, but it wasn't the scripture. It had something to do with the background image that was being used. Because if you just posted the scripture, Facebook had no problem with it. I still, to this day, I can't tell you what was wrong with the picture. And no one can. But somehow that background image, which appeared to not have anything negative about it, it just got stuck in the system as something that needed to be removed. So, anytime anybody gets up in arms that, oh, Facebook is censoring blah, 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 I'm like, 9 times out of 10, I'm like, they're actually not. It's something weird in the system that's just jacked up with this particular image. And that's definitely what that one was.
Yeah, that's bizarre. It's like now with TikTok, like any music. It's like with TikTok with music now. They're like, oh, can't use that. We're gonna mute it. That's it.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Yeah. Well, they lost their contract with Universal, I think it was, so they lost rights to a lot of music. So.
Oh yeah,
that would make sense. Yeah. Good old Universal.
That's. Yeah, music rights are weird. I think this is the one place I think Facebook has it right. Facebook has it right. Or, sorry, not Facebook. YouTube has it right on music. You could pretty much, outside of Beatles and a couple of other bands, you could pretty much use any music you want to. And you're
Ozzy
not
Osbourne
get
you can't use.
You're just not going to get money. They're going to give the money to the rights holder of the music.
Yeah.
Which is fine by me most of the time, because I'm not making money on the video anyway. Facebook is a little harsher. A lot of things get taken down on Facebook because of music too. So I'm not surprised that TikTok's having issues.
No. Ozzy Osbourne's one of those, because I posted a short not like a week ago and it blocked it.
Yeah.
Completely. Like, I had to re-edit the whole thing. I was like, what the heck? Why? I just picked a random song that, whatever, I think it was like the new Coke or whatever. They had like, it's like tear flavored, because that's a thing. And they blocked it. I was like, well, gosh darn it.
Yeah, there's a YouTube guitarist that I follow that every once in a while he'll do like this, top 20 of something, and then he'll mention a Beatles song, but he'll explicitly say, I can't play any of it for you. Now, mind you, he'll play every other song. He said, but I can't play this one for you, because if I do, I'll they'll take my video down. It's just certain right holders are hardcore on that stuff, where others are like, I don't care if you use it as long as I get the money.
Yeah, it's weird. I run a lyric video channel, and I think out of all the videos that I've done, a bunch of Christian artists, new, old, country, gospel, pop, whatever, the only one I think I ever had that went completely silent was a version of 10,000 Reasons by Matt Redman.
Interesting.
Yeah. Don't know why that one, but every other video's been fine.
It's funny.
That's funny.
So I got a question for you, Ricky, if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead.
Being a Christian and being a nerd, this today's age, society, the culture we're in, what do you think is the most pressing issue for us to try to kind of address in this day and age? Theologically, politically, whichever way you want to lean with it.
For Christian nerds in particular, or just
both, I guess
Christians
you could say.
In general?
Both, maybe. Your opinion, both, I guess. Because we of course we like to put our faith first. So if you want to go with Christians, that's fine.
Well, I will say I tend to stay out of the political world most of the time. And honestly, I tend to stay out of the theological argument side of things quite often. I think the biggest thing we should be concerned about is actually sharing the gospel with people who are seeking. People who are questioning and going, I don't, maybe they're from a different faith and now they're questioning that faith. I think we as believers a lot of times spend too much time in amongst ourselves arguing about theology when we should be out there saying, hey, so you're wondering what this whole Jesus thing's about? Here, let me come over here. Let me talk to you for a while. Let me tell you some things. Versus, having a deep theological argument about whether, whether or not, I don't even want to know what to bring up right now, but whether or not my analogy of the Trinity is heretical or not, because they all are. Let's be honest. But I think a lot of times we spend too much time arguing and not enough time just sharing the gospel with people that need to hear it. And I'm an old nerd. Nathan and I were talking right before the show. Nathan is the age of my kids. I am the quintessential Gen X. And anytime I see memes or videos that are like, this is the way Gen X is, this is the way millennials are, this is the way, I'm like, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but they pretty much have Gen X pretty pegged there. We were the first generation that the majority of us didn't go to church. Our parents, the majority of our parents weren't taking us to church. We were still pretty close to 50%, but we're kind of the generation where it pushed over the edge. Less than 50% of our parents took us to church.
Right.
We're the first generation where, abortion was legalized, and there were fewer people being born than to fill up the spaces. Because my parents are the boomers, so there's like all of these people, and now there's fewer of this filling the gaps as they pass away. So I'm in this weird situation where, I and all the generations after me, fewer and fewer of them have any experience with church outside of what they've seen on a random, TV show, or some other, or just heard people say this is what Christians are, rather than actually, getting to meet a Christian and being able to show them, what the Bible actually says. Nathan, I don't know how much you know about this, but I've just started talking about this a little bit on my podcast. For my day job, I do a lot of social media, and I work with international missions around the world, helping them use social media to find seekers online digitally, and then figure out how to meet them face to face. So I help coach international missions groups on how to run Facebook ads, literally. The big focus there is not, when we run these ads, we get people sending us messages. We're not going to have deep theological debates with them. We're not going to, if they think Christians are, the worst thing in the world, we're not here to try to convince you. We're here to share the gospel with people who want to hear who the Jesus of the Bible is. If that's you, hey, we want to have a conversation with you. There are some studies out there that say in any given population, there are about 2.5% of people who are right now questioning, faith and who God is, and are seeking answers, that want to know what what the Bible is, who Jesus might be. There are those people who are actively seeking, and that's the people that we target. That 2.5% of that population. So it's a big thing, and I think when I almost feel bad to talk about this. When I started Christian Nerds Unite, I never intended us to have deep theological discussions on Christian Nerds Unite's Facebook page or Facebook group. So, in order to spin off the theological conversations, I started a Facebook group called Theology for Christian Nerds. For one reason, to take the conversations out of this group that was designed to be fun for us to have some, to not worry about talking about our Christian faith and our current fandom. And so I spun this group off, and after a year and a half or 2 years, I finally said, you know what? The theology group is just too much for me. I can't do this anymore. And I stepped away from it. There are 5,000 people in there arguing theology every single day. And I wish those 5,000 people would just go share the gospel with somebody right now.
Right.
And if you're part of that group, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what you're saying is your groups are Christian Nerds Unite is the kids table, and Theology Group is the adult table at Thanksgiving.
I don't know that it's the adult table, but it is definitely where the arguments are.
Might be more like the kids' table, actually.
It's one end of the table. It's one end of the table.
It's the table. It's the part of the table where everybody wants to talk about politics and religion at Thanksgiving.
Yeah. They're the front porch. You shove them out to the front porch.
Versus just hanging out and enjoying each other's company and telling old stories about the funny thing that happened 3 years ago.
Oh yeah, it's yeah. I try not to talk about politics around my family. I have certain family members that are more stronger. They're more opinionated than I am, and then other people in my family. So it's like, let's not talk about XYZ that's going on right now, or it's gonna be all night with these people.
Yeah.
And sadly, I have one brother who is in Bible school currently, like a Baptist Bible school, so he's very opinionated. And then you put him in a room with other strongly opinionated family members, and it's like a powder keg. So they tend to send me to go get him, like, hey, let's calm down. I love my brother, and he listens to this, so he's gonna hear me talk about him.
That's funny.
So,
well, Crad, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I think that's the way I feel.
No, I think you basically expressed that, in your opinion, there's not enough outward gospel presentation as compared to inward fighting. Yeah. And that if we spend as much time presenting the true gospel of Jesus Christ to a sick and dying world, we'd probably do a lot better good than whether, a lot of theological things that, Paul and Peter and them talk about really doesn't make a big difference at the end of the day. It's a personal conviction. While you were talking about that, I thought back to something that happened to me years ago when I was playing drums at a church for a little bit. It was a friend of mine's church. I wasn't a regular member, but I would come on occasion and play drums for him and things like that. And I was told that if I was going to keep coming, I would have to shave my beard due to a platform standard to play drums.
It's funny.
And needless to say, being the opinionated person that I was and am currently, I didn't take that news very well. I didn't curse anybody out or anything, but I thought, man, how silly that it was their church. So of course, that's what they feel convicted to do. I can't tell them not what to do, but I just thought, man, if something like that is such a major issue, it just kind of doesn't present good things, I guess, or gives a good reflection of what the church is supposed to be about. So I agree with you. I thank you for the answer for that. That's perfectly fine. You answered my question.
Yeah, it's funny how hung up we get on stuff in the church. Like Ricky, like you're saying, like those people in that group could be reaching somebody, like talking to other people instead of arguing with each other. It feels like sometimes in the church we get hung up on certain things instead of focusing on the person outside the door. Like,
yeah,
it's a weird thing in the church. Like you get hung up on someone having a beard on a stage. Like it's interesting.
And I mean, theology is important. It is important to have a good, strong basis. But at the end of the day, whether or not we're going to go through bad stuff before Jesus comes back, or Jesus coming back before bad stuff happens, doesn't matter if people out there don't know that Jesus is coming back. And that they need to know him beforehand.
Yeah,
right. I agree.
Yeah. It's funny because I had a conversation with a coworker the other day. They're like, yeah, they went to like a Baptist church that's in my area that I went to school at. They have a high school there, and I went to that high school for years. And they're like, yeah, it's like a cult. And I had to like discuss it with them. So I'm like, well, what do you mean by cult? Because from the outside in, some people might see like organized religion and like certain denominations in the church as like a cult. Like, well, they believe your hair should be a certain length or like facial hair and like how you dress. And I'm like, well, I went to that school and you see me like, it's like they just have a belief and there's a certain way you should have an appearance. And to me, that's not a bad thing. Are they a little strong fisted with it sometimes? Yes, but it comes from like a good place. And that's kind of where that conversation ended because I don't think they were expecting my response, but it's
hence
funny.
I get called a heretic on a regular basis.
Well, what it say in the Bible, I believe it said that Jesus came to his own and his own knew him not. So there you go. Expect to be called names.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I got big shoulders. I'm okay. It's not bothering me.
Oh yeah, I let it stop bothering me. I'm like, there are many other things I can get hung up on than what someone's saying about how I look. Like I think every day I get comments about like you should cut your hair. I'm like, I'll cut it when I need it. Like, I feel like it should be longer because I had it for short, like as short as like Strangest for like so many years. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do short hair anymore. So, should I trim it? Yes, but like, whatever. To them, their own. That's how I look at it.
But. Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier that you run different. Sorry to take over for Nathan, but you mentioned earlier that you run fine. Different, groups. You have a podcast. You're involved with different things. What's kind of the end goal for you? Are you looking to continue to expand, or do you have other ideas in the pipeline, or where are you putting your most effort right now?
Ryan, I mean, Christian Nerd Unite is, as far as nerdy Christian podcasting, Christian Nerd Unite is where I put most of my focus. Especially the podcast. I would love for someday to have the podcast to be big enough that it can, pay my bills and I don't have to worry about doing other things. But I'm not worried if it doesn't ever. It'll still, it's my baby and it's, where my heart is. And I'm going to keep doing it. The other things that I do are kind of secondary, even tertiary. I don't worry so much about them. If they all disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't worry about them. I'm just, they're, like I have some other Christian Facebook groups that are pretty large. But if they disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't worry about them. They were kind of a learning bed for me to do some of the things that I'm doing now. And gave me a way to kind of test out some things before I decided to do what I wanted to do.
Nice.
But as far as the podcast, I would love the podcast to grow. The social media following can grow if it wants to. It doesn't have to. I'd rather the podcast grow.
Nice. Yeah, it's growing on social media is like so frustrating. I don't know how everyone else feels, but like it's so frustrating sometimes where it's like, especially with this, from like one of our TikToks, the recent one, actually did like one of the highest more views than it usually does. And I was like, oh, that's nice. Kind of wish I had more follows attached to all those views. But it's like, oh yeah, well, but you gotta like look at it the other way, where it's like, yeah, well, it reached someone. It reached X amount of people more than the other one did. Like in the Bible, there's no like that parable of the shepherd. It's never the shepherd wanted to have more sheep. He's more focused on the 100 and that one that was missing. It's never the shepherd wanted more sheep. Like, sometimes less is more.
It definitely can be, and depending on who you listen to in that vein, there's the idea of, would you rather have 100 ravenous fans or 10,000 fans?
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of the way my podcast is. I have a few hundred ravenous fans that listen, and then I've got 18,000 fans that really don't.
Right. Yeah, on mine it's like for a while it was like this plateau. Like I was stuck at a certain point and I'm like, this is really frustrating. And then I guess the more I like started interacting with other people, I get like the more interaction you have on the internet, the I guess the more you get noticed. And it was interesting, like the sudden, like now I'm talking to this person that I've watched, or like, oh, this random person came along and now I'm interacting with them and I'm doing this thing with them. So it's like you gotta take it where you got it, where it's like, yeah, I'm not getting this many followers, but now I've made these certain interactions that's like now leading to something else. I guess that's one way to look at it.
Through all this, I have made some really, really good friends. And that's worth every second that I've put into it. You talked about, so for those of you who are interested in social media, you talked about, you guess if you've got the more interaction you do, the more people will see things. I am fascinated by people that are convinced, well, I don't know that convinced is not the right word, but that simply don't understand how social media works. In this way. So I'm going to tell you about an ad I tried to run. I ran an ad specifically for my Christian Urge Unite page. Okay? So, target US people that were interested in things like Star Wars, Star Trek, things like that. Facebook made a big change. You're no longer able to target different beliefs, faith areas. Mm-hmm. So, church is not a target in ads, and Jesus is not a target in ads, but you can't target any other faith either. But that's just a decision they made. So I ran this ad. Well, here's what Facebook does. Facebook throws the ads out there to a bunch of people they think will like your ad. And once some people start commenting, liking, or hating your ad, it's going to give it to more people who look exactly like that. So my ad showed up, and a bunch of atheists started commenting on my ad.
Nice.
Well, okay, so does that make sense? Christian Urge Unite podcast ad gets shown to a bunch of atheists. Okay, for most people, that doesn't make sense. No, it makes perfect sense. And here's why. Those atheists, every time they see any Christian content, they comment on it. They put a laughing emoji on it. They interact with it. So what does social media say? Social media, the inner workings of social media says, this person likes interacting with Christian content. We're going to give them more of it. So anytime somebody goes, I don't understand why my feed is full of all this nasty, bad stuff. Well, it's because you comment about how bad it is, and you put a laughing emoji or a hate emoji on it. You interact with their content. that you don't like. So guess what? You're going to see more of this content you don't like because you're interacting with it. So if you ever want to clean up your news feed on any social media, here's what you do. If you see something you don't ever want to see that again, don't comment on it, don't like it, don't click it. Say, you either block it or just say, yeah, this is not the kind of content I want. But don't interact with it. And then when you see something you do want to see more of, you interact with it, you comment on it, you do everything you can on it. And eventually your timeline, your news feed will become the kind of thing you want to see more of. And people don't understand that about social media at all.
So in a weird way, that could be like a backwards witnessing tool.
In an ironic way.
Yes, that is.
They keep interacting, they keep getting more of it. Hey, come to Jesus.
That is a possibility. But anyway, it's just people don't understand that, and they wonder why they see the kind of things they see, and it's because you are encouraging it. You didn't know you were encouraging it, but you definitely are.
That's funny. You just saying that's like the most bizarre thing I've heard. Like, that's like accidental missionary. It's like unintentionally happening. It's like that actually sounds like a show someone would make. It's like accidental missionary. Just should be on like the CW or whatever. Well, not CW. They really wouldn't be keen to doing that. I don't know. That's the next VidAngel, whatever Christian streaming network there is. Sounds like something they would do.
PureFlix.
Is it? Yeah, I was like trying to think. It was like PureFlix, Angel Vids, one of those. I don't know.
So I got one more question for you there, Ricky, if you don't mind. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
No, you're good. No.
I know you've been doing podcasts for a while. You said, in your opinion, what was one of the more interesting people or topics you talked about? And on the flip side, maybe what was one of the more strange things that's happened on your podcast?
Okay. So, so I'm going to tell you a couple of my favorites. I don't know that I have a favorite, but one of my favorites was an interview with a gentleman named Scott Adams. He is not the Dilbert Scott Adams, if you're familiar. And because he's not the Dilbert Scott Adams, I actually sent him a message and said, "Hey, Scott, I would love to have you on the podcast. It's Christian Urge Unite podcast." And he replied back to me, "Are you sure you have the right Scott Adams?" And I was like, "I absolutely know I do, because I know who you are." So this Scott Adams was kind of the godfather of home computer video games. Home computer text-based video games. And he had a company called Adventureland. Now, you guys, if you're old enough, or if you remember any text-based video games, you may have heard of Zork. And Zork is kind of the big name in text-based video games. But Zork came out originally as this other game, and it was all like you had to have a mainframe to play it. So Scott was one of these people who was an early adopter and learned programming early in the 60s. He learned to program home computers back when you had video games on audio cassette. So this is pre-floppy disks.
Wow.
And
for people that don't know what that is, just rectangular disc, it's not an app on your phone.
Google it.
Yeah, Google that. You're gonna think that I'm really weird. So he created his first video games that he sold on audio cassette. And one of the things, my favorite thing he said was, I knew when a game was finished was when I ran out of memory. he would just keep creating the adventure game until there was no space left to create the adventure game, and that's where the game ended.
Wow.
He's a strong believer. He wasn't a believer when he was doing this. He became to faith later in life. But he's like in his mid-60s now, and a super great guy. Grew up as a secular Jew and came to Christ later. He had the most awesome white guy fro in the 70s. It was amazing. I had a picture of it on the podcast that I showed. It was brilliant. But super great guy. I absolutely loved that interview. The interview was like an hour and a half long, and I would ask him a question, and he would just tell me stories for 20 minutes at a time, and just brilliant. I loved every minute of it. So that was one that was really fun. Another one that was really cool. This is probably the coolest one. I don't know if it's the best one, but this is the coolest one. Are any of you fans of the X-Men the animated series from the 90s?
I've watched chunks of it. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan, but I can enjoy it.
Okay.
So
I think I probably saw some of it.
Okay. Well, there's a particular episode that a lot of Christian nerds grabbed a hold of, and it's the Nightcrawler episode.
Right, where he's witnessing.
Because Nightcrawler is a Christian,
yeah,
and it's pretty explicit in the episode, and it's really surprising if you're not used to seeing that kind of thing. Well, I had the writer of that episode on the show.
That's cool.
Nice.
Wow. Super nice guy, lives out in California. He's a prolific animation writer. He's written like 200 or 250 episodes of various things. And he wrote like 3 different episodes of the X-Men the animated series, and one of the episodes was the Nightcrawler episode. And we had a great conversation about, how did that come to be? That's, having Nightcrawler, just shy of, basically quoting scripture and sharing the gospel, and, having this unusually strong faith on a cartoon in the 90s, and he tells the story of, when I took it when the producers came to me, I started having these conversations. It's like, how far can I push this? And he's like, hey, you're a Christian. You just go as far as you can.
Wow.
And the producers just let him run with it. And it's a great episode. If you haven't watched that episode, it's on Disney Plus. Go watch it. It's worth watching.
I have a feeling like that wouldn't fly now. I feel like now that people are more opinionated, like something like that wouldn't fly now.
No, there'd be an uproar, probably.
I think it would be much, much harder, if not impossible, to do today. I'm interested to see what comes of the Daredevil series from Disney that's going to be coming out, the live action, because Daredevil having a faith, and I mean he's Catholic, and in certain iterations he has a pretty strong faith, in others he doesn't, and with them deciding to go with the current working title of Born Again, it'll be interesting to see exactly what they do with that. I'm not sure how that's going to fly, but my guess is they won't dive deeply into his faith. But I feel like they have to, at least a little. But so those are 2 really cool episodes that I got to record, interviews that I got to have. And when you ask what is the most surprising or unusual thing that ever happened on the show, so another interesting guest that I had, very strong believer, a very charismatic believer. He is the stunt double, or has been the stunt double for Sylvester Stallone.
That's cool.
And super nice guy. But he is a stunt double. And he has, I think he may have taken a few too many blows to the head over the years.
As you do.
As you do. But still super nice guy. I could not control that interview. I would ask him a question, and he would just go and chase rabbit after rabbit. And I had set this whole thing up way in advance. So the other thing was, he did the interview from his pickup truck in the middle of a hailstorm.
Wow.
It was the wildest interview I've ever had in my life. And I had no control.
That's funny.
I had completely lost control of that interview. But it was interesting, and I think after some creative editing, I think had a decent episode. But it was a little wild.
That is
wow. That's something else.
But that guy is not afraid to share the gospel with anybody. If he is on set with somebody and he knows that they don't know Jesus, he will just literally walk up to them and just share the gospel with them, whether they want to hear it or not.
Hey, if we all could be that bold.
Oh yeah.
So real quickly, since you're the guest here on our podcast, I'm going to tell you about two of my favorite strange episodes that we've had so far. One being the time that Nathaniel down there, his picture and audio completely cut out in the middle of the podcast. And so he couldn't hear us or see us, but we kept recording. And so me and Strange here had to carry on and have this whole off-the-cuff conversation that we weren't even planning just to get something recorded. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's freaking out, not sure what to do. He keeps recording.
What's going on?
It was just, I laughed so hard. You don't understand. I was crying.
That was episode too.
I was crying, laughing. It was so hilarious. And then the other thing that happened. Go ahead, Nathaniel.
Yeah, I was talking about Ricky about this before we recorded. I think I just need a new computer. I honestly, after this, I need to get with my brother. I need like an Ethernet cable or a new computer or something, because I've had no issues until we do something. My computer's 100% fine until about like now, and I don't know why, and it drives me crazy because I have my brother look at it and diagnostic.
Everybody in your neighborhood is playing Call of Duty and sucking up the internet.
Yeah, but yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. And the other one was one time we had a guest on, and Strange could not hear them nor see them, yet he sat there and nodded along like nothing was wrong, and I was feeding him on what was being said in chat so he could keep up, and we're having this whole side conversation. And so he's like nodding at the right times. He's talking at the right times. I'm basically directing on him on what to do, and the guest has no idea until like 3/4 into the conversation. And eventually we tell him, Strange can't see you nor hear you. I've been telling him what to do this entire time. It is hilarious.
That's funny.
That was fun.
That's good stuff.
Yep.
That's
fun times.
That was funny. That one was fun. I do have a couple questions.
And
if you don't mind,
you're
got time. Yeah,
I've got time. If you've got time.
Okay, perfect.
No,
first question I had thought of was, do you have any inspirations from other podcasters or Christian speakers or just anybody in terms of building your style and how you do things?
Do I have any inspirations for how I do my style? I don't. I'm not sure that I have a particular person. I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of secular podcasts, a lot of Christian podcasts. Um, one of my favorite podcasts to listen to is called Tatooine Sons. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Tatooine Sons. It is a dad and his two sons, and they started out just talking about Star Wars. It was kind of how he and his sons would connect, and their love of Star Wars. And now it's kind of morphed into more of a general pop culture podcast. I love hearing them talk. I love hearing them, share their opinions and their stories, and how they all see things from a different point of view. And then as far as like I do, my podcast is mostly interviews. So I have listened to a lot of secular interview podcasts, and I try to listen to how they ask questions, and the kind of questions they ask, and how they frame them, because I hear them getting such great answers, and I think if I can figure out how to formulate good questions, formulate a good process for asking those questions, and get them kind of to continue on that vein. I feel like that's a good way forward for me. So I'm always kind of playing around with that. But I don't know that there's a particular podcast that I feel like I've tried to style myself after. But it's mostly the studying the art of asking questions.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's like the way you have to do it, because like there's some I listen to. One of the guys who's like a high school teacher, so like he already knew like how to communicate with people. So like, and he like was very much into reading. So like his content is very analytical. So it's like his question, like his whole stick was he has two friends that don't know comic books, so that's his show. So all these questions are coming from they don't know what this is, so that therefore that's the show. So it's how like those questions are formulated versus something like Tatooine, like you were saying, Tatooine Sons, where it's like they're bonding over Star Wars. The whole discussion is over something they like. Like there are multiple ways you can ask a question.
Yeah, so there's two particular podcasts I really enjoy, and one is from Malcolm Gladwell. I love listening to Malcolm Gladwell interview anybody. Malcolm Gladwell has the art of asking questions down. I love it. I wish I could ask questions the way he does. The other is a show called Radio Lab, particularly the old Radio Lab, before one of the guys in Radio Lab left a couple of years ago, and the show kind of took a hard turn. It was kind of a science-y, nerdy, weird podcast. It was a NPR radio show, but they would ask super simple questions so that their interviewer could explain things in a way just about anybody could understand. They didn't ask such a complex question that the audience had to have prior knowledge to understand what was going on. And I think that's a great thing too. And when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm always trying to think, okay, how can I ask this question really simply so that even though I kind of already understand what this person's going to say, what this person's going to answer because I've read their book or I've watched whatever they did, but I want them to be able to communicate that to the audience. So how can I ask that question? I have to be the audience stand-in. I have to be the guy who, even if I know all of it, I have to act like I don't know any of it so that it gets explained well to the audience. And I think sometimes I'm successful and sometimes I'm not.
Right. Strange, didn't you have another question?
Cool. Yeah, so my other question, and I'll have an example after this, but in your consumption of content, whether it's geek related or like I like fantasy novels and I listen to audiobooks, have you ever come across a situation where you really like somebody's content and they're really cool, and then you find out afterwards that they're a Christian, and I think that just makes it so much more meaningful to you? For an example, I'm on TikTok. Recently, Sammy V, who's a popular TikToker, came out and kind of talked about his faith. I'm Josh from England. He's been doing a lot more Christian content. That one kind of surprised me. And in terms of audiobooks, I just finished a series called The Green Ember, which is a fantasy series. The characters are rabbits mostly and stuff like that. And at the very end of the 4-part book series, there was a message from the author, and he talked about his faith in Jesus. So have you ever had a situation like that? Like, because I thought that was really cool, and it hit me really just made it more meaningful to me. Have you had a situation like that you thought was really neat?
I'm sure I have, but I have to kind of dig through and think, who did I not realize was a Christian beforehand? And I'm not sure if there's somebody that I can go, oh yeah, this guy, I did not see that coming at all, but I loved his stuff. There's not somebody right offhand that comes to mind, but I'm sure there has been some that I'm like, I was reading, been reading their stuff for a long time, found out they're a believer. More often than not, I found that there are a few people that I have read that I find out they are not there's some variant that I was, was it, is it Orson Scott Card? He's I want to say, is he a Jehovah's Witness? He's, a lot of people would say he's not a Christian. He would say he is a Christian. And that one didn't surprise me, though, that he had some sort of faith background because of some of the books that he's written. But so there have been some like that I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting and odd. But I'm trying to think if there's someone right offhand. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out who is a believer and who isn't a believer. Because I'm trying to get people to come on to the show. So there'll be somebody, I would really like to have this person on the show. I'm not strict. I won't say that I wouldn't have someone who wasn't a believer on the show, but I feel like the show is better if the person is a believer. So I spend a lot of time researching the backgrounds of people. And I've always kind of been that way to find out. Like, I will say this one was a surprise to me, just because it was a surprise to me. But if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax is a believer, or was a believer. He passed away. But that's a surprise to a lot of people. Now, if you dig into that very hard, you'll find out some people will say he was a believer, and some people will say he wasn't a believer. In some things that he wrote, he says he is. If you talk to people about how he lived his life, maybe he wasn't. So I don't know. The only one way to find out when I get to heaven is he there. Yeah. But so I've run into a lot of that where it's like, oh, this person says they're a believer, and then I get lots of pushback. No, they're really not a believer for this reason and this reason and this reason. I'm like, well, they said they were, so I take them at their word and I move on. But right. But yeah, that's something. Just because I'm a researcher, that's just kind of what I like to do. I don't know that there's anybody who stands out right offhand. You mentioned listening to audiobooks. By the way, I love audiobooks. You mentioned fantasy. I'm more of an old school sci-fi guy.
Okay.
But if you like audiobooks, Scott Brick is one of my favorite readers. I think I could listen to Scott Brick read the phone book.
That's funny. It's strange, since you do the aren't you doing the story time stuff? You should try reading the phone book. See how that goes. Just
I've got one around here. I can probably pull out. Yeah.
Do they still send those out? I haven't seen this in forever.
Yeah,
phone
that'd
book.
Be good.
I have one. I mean, I have one in my house, but I don't think they give you the new ones. I think they've stopped. At least around here, they've stopped giving out the phone books.
I'm in a more rural community, so we have one that covers like 3 counties that I still get.
Yeah. I think the phone book's gone the way of the dinosaur, but
yeah.
But yeah, you have to use use discernment when it comes to like people that you interact with that claim to be Christian. I work with a couple people that I'll get questions about because I think people are too scared to ask these people that question of what denomination they are. Because I'm a Pentecostal, always been in the Pentecostal church, and then I have some people I work with that are more of the skirt wearing type, and then the more I talk to them, I find out like they're Mormon or something like that. So it's like I always get the Mormon questions, and I have to explain to people there's the different denominations, the different like groups. I have to always explain that to people that I work with because I don't think they 100% understand all of that. So it's you gotta see test their fruit. Actions will speak louder than words most of the time.
Yeah,
but that's kind of how that goes.
Ted Decker, I think, is an author that a lot of people probably don't know that he has some sort of faith. I'm not sure what his background is.
Ted Decker's interesting for sure.
Yeah, he's got quite a few Christian-based books that I know of.
Oh yeah, he's
Frank Peretti as well.
He's a Circle series.
Yeah, Circle series is Ted Decker.
Yeah, Circle series is his.
That's what I thought. That was a really strong Christian.
Oh yeah,
I heard.
And Frank Peretti is interesting.
I read
to me
it
too.
I listened to the audiobook. So yeah.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of interesting ideas that they have in their books, but
I'll get pushback from people. Sometimes it's like, if some fantasy book or whatever, and maybe it has some Christian theme kind of in it a little bit, and I'll get pushbacks from people. It's like, you shouldn't read that because their theology is all messed up. My first thought is, if you're getting theology from a fantasy book, you're doing it wrong. It's like, that's not where I'm getting my theology from. My theology comes from the Bible. This is fun fantasy, and if it happens to have some faith theme in it, that's not a problem for me.
Oh yeah, again, some people get hung up on certain stuff. It's like enjoy the book, enjoy the show. If you get something out of it, that's kudos to you. Some are going to get more out of it than others.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
one of those things. Does anyone else have any other questions? Ricky, we don't want to keep you all night, so. Oh. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say if you guys got any more questions, we could. So yeah, Ricky, I don't want to keep you all night, so we can. In the podcast. So where can they find you, Ricky?
You can find everything, links to everything, at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. We have a Facebook page, Instagram page. I've got a TikTok, but I haven't been keeping up with it very much. If you're on TikTok, I would love to have you follow me. Maybe I'll start kicking up my TikTok a little more. But you can find links to everything over at ChristianNerdsUnite.com.
Nice. I will. You don't have to go to the website, but you could also go down below. I'll put it down there if you want to see on one tab on your computer or your phone or wherever you're listening to this. Also, you could follow us at Pizza Party Pod on social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Those are like the main three. We are also part of a Discord chat, Those Christian Geeks, where we're all there at different points, different parts of the group. Talk
not
about
Those Christian
stuff.
Geeks anymore.
Or I'm sorry, God First Geek second.
Not.
Gosh darn it. Aha!
Yeah.
But anyway, it's all there down below. Well, again, we all talk about different stuff, so I keep forgetting they changed it. To be fair, it is he didn't change it that long ago, so I get a pass. So
no, it's very recent.
Oh yeah, it's very recent. You can find me at FT_Fast Food Reviews. A video you can check out because it's pizza related. KFC decided to make a pizza thing, so you could check that video out because that's a thing that KFC wanted to do. I don't know why, but they did. Yeah, have fun watching that video because I didn't realize my aperture wasn't high enough, so the video is going to look a little wonky on my new video camera. So, Strange, where can they find you?
You can find me at Strange Lyrics on YouTube, as well as Strange Plays Games on Twitch, Strange to Society, where I'm Sunday nights. I'm reading fantasy books and old mythologies, Grimm's fairy tales, stuff like that. And those are kind of the main three active things right now that I've got going on. So
nice. And yeah, Silly, he's usually here. He's got stuff. He's got like
Crad working with
and Ricky, you have just been a part of a random and weird occurrence here on the Long Distance Pizza Party podcast. Thank you for coming. You can find me here at a local restaurant or perhaps in the funny papers. I don't know at this point. This might have been the highlight of the whole podcast right here. Came at the 11th hour.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a joy having you, Ricky. Thank you so much.
It was great being here.
Doing this with us.
Yeah, I might do a part 2 sometime.
Absolutely. Feel free to invite me anytime.